I'm Effie and this is What Effie Reads. In case you don't know, I am queer AF, and despite my present love for makeup, I'm also non-binary AF. So that's me. This is my second video of LGBTQ plus book recs because honestly you can never have enough queer book recommendations. So I guess we'll start off with the 4 that are behind me. I believe last time I'd only read Heartstopper Volume 1, but I thoroughly recommended it. Having now read all 4, and as soon as the 5th one comes out, whenever it comes out, I will be reading the 5th one. I can highly recommend them all. It's a really cute story about Nick and Charlie who are sat next to each other at school and they end up falling for one another, and it's really sweet to see them sort of slowly falling in love, and then you get to see their relationship develop and how they have to deal with the challenges that they face, and it goes quite deep into mental health difficulties, and it's just so well crafted. And the fact that they're graphic novels and super easy to read, super quick to read, definitely doesn't hurt. The next recommendation that I've got, again, I think I mentioned one of the books in the series in my last video, but I've now read like the rest of the series that's available, and it is the Wayward Children series. So you've got Every Heart a Doorway, Down Among the Sticks and Bones, Beneath the Sugar Sky, which I always get the title wrong, so hopefully I've got it right this time, In an Absent Dream. There's a novella called Juice Like Wounds, and then you've got Come Tumbling Down and Across the Green Grass Fields, which is the one I recommended last time, and coming out in January you've got Where the Drowned Girls Go. And I just absolutely love this series. I think it's so well crafted. There are a whole host of queer characters and a wide variety of the different flavours of queer characters. And even the books that aren't queer, Seanan McGuire is. So it's a fabulous queer recommendation. I believe this is the thing. I believe in my last video that I said it was middle grade. I've now been told in no uncertain terms this is an adult series, so be aware. The next recommendation I've got for you is Nina Is Not Okay by Shappi Khorsandi. This book deals with a 17-year-old girl who is battling with alcoholism, and it's kind of her journey to sobriety, I suppose. But there's also like other aspects of mental health included within the book. It's not an easy read, but it's such a good read, and the fact that it has a queer protagonist just makes it all the better. The next 2 recommendations kind of go hand in hand. We've got 7 Days Monday to Sunday by Venio, Tachibana and Rihito Takarai. And we also have Date Me Bryson Keller by Kevin Van Whye. And the reason I'm putting these 2 together is Date Me Bryson Keller is heavily inspired by 7 Days Monday to Sunday. The concept is essentially that there is a teenage boy at this school that will date the first person to ask them out at the start of every week, and then they will just date for 1 week. And the way that this concept is a little bit different in the manga versus the novel is that in the manga, it's never actually stated that it's person as opposed to girl, but it still works. And also that they date the first person for a week, and then the reason they break up is because they say they can't fall in love with them. Whereas in the novel, it is explicitly said that it's person. And that's kind of the loophole that the protagonist uses to ask Bryson Keller out. And in addition to that, it's established that they date for 1 week because it's part of a dare. And then the stories do diverge quite a bit. So you've got this same initial setup, but then the way that the characters interact and fall in love is very different. But they're both really cute queer stories. The next recommendation that I've got for you is another graphic novel, and it is On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. This takes place in space, and you've got this young woman who has joined a crew who are tasked with rebuilding and restoring kind of ancient buildings throughout the galaxy. And as the story progresses, you learn more about this young woman's teenage years, and you learn about her first love, and then the way that all their stories interconnect so that you get this really satisfying like final mission, big conclusion to the story. And I just absolutely loved it. It's a world where honestly I don't know if het relationships even exist. To my knowledge, there weren't any het relationships in this novel. And you also have some really cool, you also have a really cool non-binary character who is completely badass. You've got some great lore, and the artwork is absolutely stunning. Like, it's quite simple in places, but just look how visually impactful that is. So I highly, highly recommend it. The next recommendation that I've got for you is The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This was a book that I picked up because I was interested in reading more Paul Tremblay, and I didn't realise it was queer when I picked it up. It centres on a young girl and her 2 dads who receive visitors at their isolated cabin, and these visitors put forward a terrifying proposal to them and tell them that if they don't comply, the world is going to end. And it's this just absolutely full of tension and horror novel, and you have no idea how it's gonna go. And then the way that ends completely blew me away. It was absolutely fantastic, and it just makes me want to read more of Paul Tremblay. However, I am a little bit nervous because so far the 2 Tremblay novels that I've read have had similar-ish endings in tone, and I'm a bit worried that I'll read another one and it'll have a different ending and I'll be like, oh, that's a bit disappointing. Anyway, back to the recommendations. The next recommendation that I've got for you is Never Kiss Your Roommate by Philline. This takes place in a international boarding school set in the UK, and you've got this young lesbian girl who starts crushing on her roommate, and you've also got this young boy that she meets on the train to the boarding school and becomes fast friends with, and he is bisexual, and he falls in love with the school player, for want of a better word. So it's a really cool, like very, very queer novel. And they're kind of messy, but also, so the thing that I love about this book is that it doesn't have a trope that I wouldn't say I hate it, but you know, it appears in almost every like queer high school book, graphic novel, etc. And it's, you know, the panic about being outed and someone threatening to out someone before they're ready. And this book doesn't have that. Like, you do have your protagonist isn't ready to be out, but no one's putting pressure on her. You know, the girl that she's fallen for is completely fine with her taking her time. There's this kind of like almost like Gossip Girl character, but they're very good to like maintain anonymity and not out people before they're ready as well. So it was just so refreshing to see that not existing in the book. The next recommendation that I've got for you is The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This book follows a young man from maybe the start of secondary school until his first year of university, and you're following his journey as he's coming to terms with his sexuality, and also as he begins to learn about drag and use that to explore his identity further. And it's a great book that features the intersectionality of race and queer identity. And I also appreciate the mixed media format. It's kind of, I always forget the term. It's like a novel in verse, but it also contains like poems that stand on their own, and there's great illustrations throughout. It is an incredibly quick read, despite being, I think it's like 350 pages long, but it takes you maybe 3 hours to get through. The next recommendation that I've got is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. If you've watched many of my videos, you've probably heard me talk about this book before, because I first read it in June, so just last month, and I am absolutely obsessed with it. It is just such a good piece of literary fiction, and it tells the lives, it follows the lives of 4 young men after they've just finished university and they have moved to New York. And whilst you are following these 4 young men, you're primarily following Jude, who is quite enigmatic and suffers a lot with his mental health, and Willem, who is a actor just starting out. And you follow them over the course of, I think it's something like 30 or 40 years. And you see their relationships develop, you see their lives move on. And you also see the ongoing battle that Jude has with his mental health. And it's not an easy book, and it's one that the reason people tell you to check out trigger warnings is because it can be incredibly triggering. There's some parts of this book that I related to so deeply, and there's also some really, really difficult aspects to this book, but it is exceptionally well written, and it has twists and turns that I never would have seen coming. So if you're in a place where you can read this book, I highly, highly recommend it. The next book we've got is Peter Darling by S.A. Austin Chant. This is a book that I first discovered probably a couple of months ago. I noticed that there were a few Peter Pan retellings coming out this year. So I thought, oh, let's see what unique Peter Pan retellings we can find. And I came across a blurb for this book and was so captivated with the concept. And then I discovered it was out of print. But thankfully, it has come back in print as of the 1st of June. And it is everything I hoped it would be. I probably can't do the blurb justice, but essentially you have Peter, who is actually a trans man, and it's who the oldest of the darling children actually is. And because of the nature of this book, it does feature transphobia and it does feature dead naming. When looking up content warnings for my Peter Pan retelling video, I did come across people reporting homophobia as well in this book. I didn't notice it so much, but then that's because the dead naming and the transphobia are quite present in this book. And it's not it's a difficult one because the whole book revolves around the fact that Peter isn't seen as Peter by his family. It's a difficult decision to make to include things like dead names in the book, but I feel like, obviously no one should ever be dead named, but it makes narrative sense why there is dead naming and transphobia in the book, but be aware that that is very present. But what I really loved about the book was Pan and Hook's relationship, and the way that you see Hook as not just this big bad villain, but someone that has a lot more dimension to him. So I definitely recommend, especially because it is a take on the Peter Pan story that I hadn't seen before and thoroughly enjoyed. And the final recommendation that I've got for you is Loki, Agent of Asgard. I apparently forgot to write down the author for this, but it is a series of comics, obviously by Marvel, and it features Loki. And what I really, really loved about this graphic novel was just how queer Loki is. Like, anyone familiar with Norse mythology knows that Loki is gender fluid, and I'm not sure what sexuality identity Loki uses canonically. However, Loki is interested in all genders. And this comic makes it part of the Marvel canon. I mean, I don't understand comics, so I don't know what makes something part of the canon, but it's Loki as Loki should be. And it's the way that there's one part where Loki is talking about how they struggle to shapeshift now, and you have Loki changing presentations from panel to panel to panel, and another character is going, I thought you couldn't shapeshift. And Loki makes a really off the cuff comment being like, I can, as long as it's into myself. And I just love that you see Loki going from masculine to feminine, from panel to panel, and Loki's like, it's all me. So it was such an affirming comic. And, beyond that, it's a really fun story. You see, as you might be able to gather, I don't read much in the way of comics, but there's this character called Verity Willis who is a human lie detector, and I absolutely loved her character. And then you've also got loads of really cool characters. You have some backstory to how Loki came to be where they are. So overall, loads and loads of fun. So I was editing this video and realised that I forgot to talk about my favourite line in Loki, Agent of Asgard. Light spoilers, so skip to the timestamp that I pop on screen if you want to not hear light spoilers about it. But there's this really fantastic line where Odin is talking to his children, and he says something along the lines of, "I love you, my children, my son, my daughter, and my child who is both a son and a daughter." And I just absolutely loved that line, and it was such a beautiful message of acceptance and basically summed up everything that is good about the Norse mythology, I guess. So that is part 2 of my LGBTQ plus book recommendations. As always, I'd love if you have any queer book recommendations for me. Pop them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more queer book recommendations from me, please do give it a like, and until next time, bye!